Good evening and welcome to Access Iowa City, a program about the disability rights movement and independent living in southeastern Iowa. Access Iowa City is brought to you by a generous contribution from the Noon Pilots of Johnson County, the Extended Dream Foundation, and collaborations between Access to Independence and the Center for Disabilities for Development, and also through the help of all of hardworking folks here at Public Access Television Channel 18. I'm Terry Cunningham, President of the Board of Directors of Access to Independence, Vice Chair of the Johnson County Mental Health Disability Services Planning Council, and an individual who's lived with a significant disability for over 41 years. Tonight, we're happy to have with us Geoffrey Lauer, Executive Director of the Brain Injury Alliance of Iowa, and of course, Keith Ruff. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you.
Could you kind of give us a background of just what the Brain Injury Alliance of Iowa is about, and who they serve, where they serve, all the nitty-gritty
Sure.
details?
Sure. Thank you, and thanks for inviting me in tonight. The Brain Injury Alliance of Iowa, in one form or another, has been around since 1981. It was the second chartered state affiliate of then the National Head Injury Foundation, and which became the Brain Injury Association of America. And then more recently, we've changed our name to the Brain Injury Alliance of Iowa and are associated with states within the United States Brain Injury Alliance. But really what this organization is a response more than 30 years ago to an increasing issue and need of responding to the challenges of living well with brain injury in Iowa. After the Vietnam War, as has happened in most other military conflicts in history, to harken back to the Civil War was a chance, sadly, for physicians to learn a lot about orthopedics because of the number of amputations that happened in the Civil War. And if you've ever seen the old medical displays on Civil War, you see that there's a lot of saws and chips and just kind of carpenter's tools. And so orthopedics went from carpentry to really a refined medical profession. The Vietnam War brought us some different and tragic and also helpful military medicine that permeated civilian medicine in the 60s and beyond. Two things happened in that conflict. One is that medical transport became much more efficient, using helicopters to get people who'd been injured from a variety of trauma, including brain injury, from the scene of the trauma to a emergency medical situation fast, within a golden hour. That permeated our American Medical Trauma Center. And so now, in most places in the United States, folks have access to a trauma care system via life flight helicopters. That's the one piece. The second piece that's happened in that period of time is that the ability to intervene with moderate and severe injury became better. And so people who previously were not living from moderate or severe brain injury started to live in increasing numbers. Family members, people with brain injury themselves, and other caregivers banded together across the country in the early 80s to try to communicate and share stories about what was working in terms of services, supports, prevention, education, advocacy, and research. Because this was an area that hadn't been well dealt with. So the brain injury movement in Iowa did start frankly, in Waterloo, Iowa, was where the base for brain injury expertise was at the time. And now it's kind of it's permeated beyond Waterloo, and the Brain Injury Alliance of Iowa has offices and staff in Urbandale, outside of Des Moines, and also an administrative office in Iowa City. But we also have chapters and support groups throughout the state. So that's kind of in a nutshell kind of what happened. Folks started to live, and we have now in Iowa more than 95,000 Iowans with long-term disability from brain injury. And that's more than, a number of our, number of communities combined in Iowa. So it's a pretty big group of people that are challenged.
Jeff, you had mentioned that the Civil War had a large effect on that. What would you say the Iraqi War had on the brain injury in Iowa?
A great question, Keith, and that is so appropriate. The Civil War had this impact on orthopedics. The Vietnam War opened the door for people to survive. The Iraqi and Afghanistan conflicts have resulted in brain injury being the signature injury of our military men and women fighting overseas. And so unlike any other conflict, brain injury is on the mind, no pun intended, of the Department of Defense and the Veterans Administration, because it is the biggest, one of the, if not the biggest issue of our military and war fighters coming back. Consequently, there's been this additional explosion of interest, research, and effort around rehabilitation and research into the prevention and then services and rehabilitation for brain injury. And so the field is kind of doing a secondary explosion where there's now more information about what works. And this is now, there's a big buzz word in medicine called evidence-based medicine. Show us that something makes a difference and that there is scientific evidence for that happening. And there are now more and more techniques to help people recover from brain injury and to adapt and accommodate their environments to live well with brain injury than we've ever had before. And so that information is functionally pouring out of our military research systems and our civilian research systems. And what the Brain Injury Alliance does when it's doing its job well is to make that information rapid, relevant, and reliable to Iowans. And we have a phone number that'll be flashed up, but I'll pop it up now. If somebody in Iowa wanted information about brain injury at any level, from early on through living life later, there's a toll-free number that we have that's 855-444-6443, or we're at biaia.org.
And isn't it likely, because of the way wars are fought now, that brain injuries are going to continue to probably be the most prominent injuries in wars?
Well, I'm not a prognosticator on how people can discover ways to rain pain and agony on each other through warfare. But I think that what you're getting at is that in the military theater, if you will, I'm not sure why it's called a theater, it's not quite a play, but there's been a great deal of success in protecting the body. So the body armor that our men and women who are fighting have, the ceramic body armor, the lightweight body armor, is now protecting people from death. There's still a fair number, as you've probably seen, of amputees and people with orthopedic injuries and with physical disabilities. But the one place we haven't been able to protect, and it's not just in the military, the sports area that we'll get to, and I want to talk about that, is also a big deal. You can't really protect the head because energy moves through and damages the brain. Unlike many other organs in the body, the brain is particularly vulnerable to big bursts of energy, either from an explosion, an improvised explosive device, or a football or sports impact, or a motor vehicle impact, or falling off a ladder. I mean, there's lots of ways.
Other than the non-military brain injuries, what are the most common, I guess, ways to acquire brain injury?
Right. In Iowa and across the country, up until a few years ago, the number one cause of brain injury were motor vehicle crashes. And the great news is that through design changes in motor vehicles and an increased use of seat belts and the use of airbags, and frankly, in the engineering of vehicles to become more safe, as well as roadway engineering. When I drive back and forth from Des Moines, for example, I've seen over the last couple of years now pretty much the whole continuous length of Interstate 80 has a barrier between lanes, and so we're decreasing the amount of head-on collisions. So motor vehicles used to be the number one. It's now the number two cause, and that's great. So we've reduced the number one cause to number two, but that leaves something else to become number one. And so in Iowa and across the country, falls are the number one cause of brain injury amongst our citizens. And the falls happen in different ways for different age groups. For the littlest kids, particularly the toddlers to those who are up to 5 or 6, falls are the kinds of exposures that put kids at risk are falls from playground equipment, falls from climbing trees, falls downstairs. And then there's this the next age group of citizens, if you will, which are young adults, older teens and young adults. That's where motor vehicles still becomes the number one cause amongst that group. There's a big increase of that group, and actually within that group, Terry, the people who are most at risk are young men. And there seems to be something about testosterone that's just somewhat correlated with brain injury. Either risk-taking behavior, driving fast, young drivers who might not have years of experience under their belts. And we're taking some steps in that area to try to reduce those. But then after that phase, falls comes back online, and the cumulative number of falls takes over because our elders, if you will, in Iowa, and I'm not sure how to best decide when somebody's an elder. I kind of feel some days that you and I are probably in that class.
I feel that way every day.
Never, Keith. The folks who are falling from ladders, the classic example is some guy in his 50s who might have every spring or fall been comfortable getting up on a ladder to clean out the gutters, and just never really noticed that the balance wasn't the same way as it used to be, falls off a ladder. And then most specifically, falls amongst our elders through either hazards in the home, falls downstairs, and also falls related to perhaps medications. Many folks, as they get on in years, they find themselves on maybe more than one medication. Sometimes when there's an addition to a medication or a change of medication, those medications can result in people having balance issues. And so we find people falling and having brain injuries as a result of maybe having their medications changed. So we always encourage folks to talk to their pharmacists and their doctors to try to prevent that. There are some things that we can do and have done to prevent that. And one of our goals at the association is to work on prevention as well. I'll talk a little bit about the supports we have and the services and information we have available, but we're also very much focused on trying to reduce the incidence of brain injury in Iowa through one example, and we kind of alluded to that a few minutes ago, sports. In addition to your comment, Keith, about the Iraq and Afghanistan deal, we've had a huge explosion of awareness about brain injury through football. The National Football League, I think, is expecting by the end of the year about 1,000 individual or group combined lawsuits. Yeah. 2 years ago, they approached our organization, the Brain Injury Alliance, and asked whether we would work with them to get a law passed in Iowa that would better protect our youth in high school athletics. And we thought that was pretty much a good idea. So the National Football League and the Brain Injury Alliance collaborated at the State House, and we, in July of last year, July 1st of 2011, the governor had signed and this law went into effect, which requires every student athlete and their parents to get at least a one-page information sheet about the signs, symptoms, and behaviors of brain injury. Every school official and coach to get some training about the signs, symptoms, and behaviors of injury. And whenever a student athlete is suspected of having a brain injury or otherwise known as a concussion, we use the word concussion. We talk about getting our bell rung or getting dinged, or there's all kinds of other scene stars. Those are all forms of mild brain injury. Whenever that's observed or suspected, the athlete is required by law to be removed from play and to have a break and to be assessed by a licensed healthcare provider before coming back into play. And so that's also really raised awareness about brain injury, as well as the number of professional athletes who are concerned about it.
Jeff, what is the stance of the Iowa Brain Association of Brain Injury on the lack of motorcycle helmets?
Great question, Keith. So over the last couple of decades, we have in Iowa, as you may recall, not had a helmet law,
Yeah.
and then we had a helmet law, and then it was repealed. Iowa has the ignominious honor of being one of 3 states in the country, along with Illinois and New Hampshire, that don't have any kind of a helmet law. So this year, starting in this legislative session, the Brain Injury Alliance is increasing its efforts to educate and advocate for a universal helmet law in Iowa, so that we can join, instead of those 3 states, the rest of the states who are making a point to protect our citizens from, not only from the injury and the social cost and the financial cost, but also the costs of these injuries are borne by the taxpayers.
Do we have any idea why the stance in Iowa is against the law?
So I don't really know that I can speak articulately for those who are opposed to it. I do know that some of the concerns that have been expressed are that this violates the constitutional rights that people have to freedom. And I think that that's an interesting argument, but kind of a false argument, because this actually, the helmet law has been upheld as constitutional in many states, including a Massachusetts court case that went to the U.S. Supreme Court. And the U.S. Supreme Court said it is constitutional for states to require certain kinds of safety parameters for their citizens. So we have seatbelt laws. That's just, not many people are talking about. We have child seat requirements.
Yeah.
And so helmets fall into that same category under the law and under the Constitution. There's also a feeling of freedom, that we should let people have the freedom to ride less fettered and let the wind flow through their hair. And I happen to have a Harley myself. It's not something that I talk too much about, and here I am talking about it. I inherited it from my father-in-law when he passed away. He actually told me that I wouldn't get one any other way because I was part of the Brain Injury Alliance, and so this was the only way I would get a Harley. But as a result, I do spend some time talking to other motorcycle riders about this. And people are very passionate about not having their freedoms restricted. I guess my sense, as well as the Brain Injury Alliance and many other groups such as the Iowa Trauma Care providers, the Academy of Pediatrics, there are scores of collaborators that we're bringing together to try to help educate about the medical, social, and economic costs of not having a helmet law, because they run through every dimension. It simply costs hundreds of millions of dollars to support people for their medical care and rehabilitation care after surviving brain injuries without helmets. The data is clear that wearing a helmet absolutely, conclusively reduces the incidence of brain injury and death.
Yeah. You would think people would rather be alive and wear a helmet than not wear one.
Yeah, but it's never going to happen to them.
Well, and brain injury is the last thing that's on your mind until it's the only thing that's on your mind.
Yeah.
One of the other pieces that we've seen problematic is that many times the unhelmeted riders are young women who end up on the backs of motorcycles as they drive around. And when there is and they happen, a motorcycle crash, they're the ones who take the brunt. And so we know that we can protect young women, we can protect passengers if we simply require a universal helmet law. This last year in Iowa City, in southeast Iowa, there was an effort by some of our high school advocates to get it was an age 17 or under helmet law passed. And the Brain Injury Alliance was supportive of that. But as we've gone back and looked at what works around the country, we've learned that that's not good enough. The Iowans deserve better than that. They deserve better protections.
Absolutely. And I think that a whole lot of that youth and testosterone has to do with that.
It
But
does, and it's
really
good stuff.
sad.
It's good stuff, that youth and testosterone. I think that there's a real great passion that I have a great amount of respect for from folks who want to be independent. I mean, that's what we're here talking about. The ability to be as independent as possible with a disability, but the issue of trying to prevent disabilities whenever possible, and some just aren't preventable. So for brain injuries that aren't preventable, if you'll let me talk for a second about what kind of services we do have available.
Sure.
Awesome. So we do a lot of education for the public, for people with brain injury, about what might be happening after a brain injury. Then there's all kinds of brain injuries. There are mild brain injuries, moderate, and severe. One of the paradoxes about brain injury is that some people with a mild brain injury may have a severe outcome. And some people who have a really severe injury actually have a mild outcome. And one of the things we say in the brain injury business, if you know one person with a brain injury, you know one person with a brain injury. No two brain injuries are alike. That said, there are some common kinds of consequences from brain injury, physical consequences, emotional, cognitive, and intellectual. One of the ones that I think is the media picks up on is memory issues. People have amnesia. They might have forgotten who they are. I mean, the classic media portrayal is you get bonked on the head, you come to, you don't remember who you are, you've lost track of your loved ones, and it comes back to you in a very dramatic conclusion. That doesn't typically happen in the real world. Memory issues can be really pesky issues if you don't remember. You get to work and you think, did I turn off the stove? Some of those things can result in significant consequences. There are techniques to help people compensate for those. There are apps on smartphones that we help communicate and connect people with. We have, through that 855-444-6443 phone number, 5 full-time certified brain injury specialists who do nothing but support Iowans with brain injury to choose, get, and keep services and supports. And so if somebody were to want to get information about what's happened to them or to somebody who's just recently had a brain injury or who's having trouble at work and worried about getting fired, we have supports that we can go in and help communicate with to the employers what the requirements are based on the ADA to try to provide reasonable accommodations to people. We have a peer mentoring network. We call it the Brain Injury Support Network, BISON. We have these neuro-resource facilitators who will call people back on a regular basis and check in with them. Given that memory issue, some people forget to call us back and when they have more issues. And so we do try to do outreach. And we're working, I think now we have 2,500 folks that we're actively working with through our resource facilitation process. One other piece, Terry, that we have around the state is 8 chapters and support groups. There's one that meets just right upstairs in this building here in Iowa City at Uptown Bills, and that's part of the East Central Iowa chapter of the Brain Injury Alliance of Iowa. They provide support for 2 support groups, one in Iowa City and one in Cedar Rapids, and it's a place where folks can come and share information with each other, what's worked, who they talk to in the community that gives them the best feedback, what medical people seem to get it and the ones that maybe don't get it. And that's sometimes hard to explain unless you walk that walk. I have a family member who's had a brain injury, and so that's as close as I've been, that I'm aware of, to being in that group. The other piece that we do is we support research. We work with our colleagues at the University of Iowa, hospitals and clinics, and also at the Mayo Clinics. We're involved in some research projects where we try to connect some members of the Brain Injury Alliance who are interested in research projects to try to learn more about how to help people in Iowa live well with brain injury.
Yeah, do you think people are careless with their lives like this because they're depending on too much on medical technology to take care of the injury afterwards?
Say it again, Keith.
Okay. when we have people riding without helmets,
Yes.
both bikes
Yep.
and whatever,
I got
do
you.
you think people are relying too much on medical technology to take care of the damage already done?
Well, that's an interesting question. I'm going to answer I don't think people, for example, depend on medical technology to fix them. Although, when I talk to trauma surgeons and trauma medical staff, they say that the folks in the ERs and in the trauma centers can fix almost every physical or organ system from trauma except the brain.
Okay.
So people shouldn't be fooled to think that a neurosurgeon can go in and fix a brain injury. It doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. It takes the brain takes a long time, sometimes years, to heal. Do people rely on that? I hope not, because it's not available.
Yeah, that would be very scary to think anybody is doing that.
I would hope not. I think what people, as you said, people don't think about what the risk is. In our community here in Iowa City, we have a big moped.
Yeah.
There's a lot of kids on mopeds. There's a lot of kids. There's a lot of young adults on mopeds. It's an efficient, economical way to get around town. I'm always cringing because I was once one of those people who might have worn flip-flops and shorts and not worn a helmet, scooting around on a moped because I didn't know what I didn't know. In the business that I'm in, I want to wear a helmet when I'm driving because now that I know what I know. I think that that's just that issue of becoming more knowledgeable, and I think that the increase of awareness through the military brain injuries and through sports concussion brain injuries, we absolutely are seeing an overall increase in awareness and a willingness to kind of engage in this discussion, and it's kind of a softening to folks. Yeah, I need to wear a helmet. I mean, I just need to protect my stuff. If you're going to wear, if you're in a sports environment, you wear appropriate sports gear. If you're going to play hockey, you're going to wear a cup. Why not protect the other part of your body that's just as important?
Yeah.
This is true.
And what I said before, Jeff, I didn't mean that people do it with intent.
Sure.
I just think
The
when it does happen, they rely a lot on medical technology.
I think we probably all do to some degree. There's certainly the ability to intervene and save people from what was previously brain injury that would kill someone has increased, and that's why we have 95,000 Iowans who are living with lifelong disability from brain injury.
Well, we've come to the end of our time for tonight. Thank you, Jeff, for covering what we did. I suspect we need to do another episode on this.
Be happy to come back.
Thanks, Keith.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Jeff.
everybody else.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Thank you out there. Stay cool.